Lonely Monk Productions. I don't know if y'all have heard Cinderella by Remy Wolf yet, but yo,
that's my Jawn!
Hey, yo, displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. You're tasting things that don't need to be measured. You ain't being judged, you won't get a What's score. Good, friends and family, neighbors near and far? Welcome to an all-new episode of the Yo, That's My Jawn podcast. The podcast, website, brand, movement, way of life dedicated to the embrace and championing of your passions. I'm your host, Nate Runkle, a.k.a. Jonathan Banks, a.k.a. Nate 3.0. Back at it again with yet another episode of the podcast. As always, I hope this podcast finds you all in good health and in good spirits. On today's episode, I finally sit down for a chat with my pal John Vettese from WXPN. We cover a wide range of stuff, and the conversation was every bit of an absolute joy as I knew it would be. And that's coming up in a bit here. But first, a little sup check. So, sup? Hope all is well with you and yours. Things are staying busy over here on my end. You know, this past weekend, I DJ'd a daddy-daughter dance for a bunch of elementary and middle school kids and their fathers. And it was a pretty cute event. And there are some observations I made while doing so that I would like to share with you now, which, first, I feel like the daddy-daughter dance had to be invented by someone who was probably neither daddy nor daughter. And that isn't to say that they didn't have fun, but it was really funny to watch these dads, some of who were wearing what we affectionately like to call our wedding funeral suit for those who never really have a reason to dress up like that outside of a celebration of marriage or death. You know, watching them awkwardly stand around the dance floor while their daughters sing and dance with their friends. But y'all, not all dads. Shout out to the dad who maybe only ever left the dance floor to go to the bathroom or get a beverage. My guy was putting in work. My favorite moment of the evening was at the end of the cha-cha slide, my guy walking off the dance floor, dabbing sweat from his brow while loudly proclaiming to the girls on the dance floor, "Good job, guys." Fucking love that dude. But my big observation, the biggest one, and what I mainly want to take some time to talk about, was completely music related. And that is the power and popularity of one Taylor Swift. And I know what you're saying. No duh, Nate. She's the biggest pop star in the world. But y'all, after this weekend, I feel like that even downplays just how huge she is. My entire night was fielding requests for more and more Tay-Tay, and not just the hits, deep album cuts. And they knew every single word and sang as if it were their own teardrops on that guitar, so to speak. It was wild. I originally started to pace it out, trying to find some other songs to slide in between all of the requests. But after a while, it just became so abundantly clear that all they wanted to do was listen to Taylor Swift, no matter what OCD I may have about playing the same artist back to back to back to back. And so I gave in. And that dance became a stop on the Errors tour. We visited songs from her first album, songs from the latest, and everywhere in between, Taylor's versions when available, of course. And these girls at no point got tired of it, guys. They requested all 10 minutes of All Too Well Taylor's version, and god damn it, I played all 10 minutes of All Too Well Taylor's version. I legitimately cannot think of another artist that ever could command an entire night like this. And not 2 or 3 people that were into it, but the entire crowd, all ages, little ones just starting elementary school, and all the way to the older ones preparing to leave. And not just enjoying and dancing, but singing along to every word as if their lives depended on it. It was truly magical. One other thing I wanted to mention ahead of my chat with John here is the loss of the Grape Room. If you haven't heard, this past week, we lost yet another independent music space here in the area suddenly. And this one hurt me for so many reasons. I've talked about it a bunch on the show, but that was the venue and stage that first took a chance on me, not just as a solo artist as Nate 3.0, but all the way back to when Randy Major and I were doing the Impact Players. And so many great artists and bands grace that stage. You've heard me say it nothing short of 50 million times on this show, and I do it again in this interview, but Jeff Buckley played on that stage. G Love played on that stage, and those two alone made that place a sacred ground to me. And now it's no more. And that bums me the hell out. Guys, support local music. Get out there. If you got a night out and you like listening to live music, hit up an independent venue, whether you know who is on the bill or not. You know, your favorite bands didn't get their start playing 1,000-seat rooms overnight. These places are vital. So shout out to Scooter for keeping the Grape running as long as he did, man. You know, I'm going to miss the hell out of that place. If you haven't done so already, jump on over to www.yothat'smyjawn.com and check out all of the links to the website, the mailing list, the merch, the socials, all of it. Yothat'smyjawn.com is your one-stop shop for all that pops. And you can follow us on those aforementioned socials at YoThat'sMyJawn. Okay, that's all out of the way. Let's get on with the show. My guest today got his start at WXPN as a volunteer in 2006 before coming aboard full-time in 2012. Besides his work with 88.5, he is an accomplished music writer and live music photographer, freelancing for outlets like The City Paper and Magnet, just to name a few. Currently, you can hear him every Tuesday night on WXPN from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. for the WXPN Local Show, and on Fridays from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on the newly made weekly 90s throwback show, What's the Frequency? Folks, it is my honor to welcome to the show, Jawn Vettese. Ladies and gentlemen, I am joined today by the great Jawn Vettese. Jawn, thank you for joining me on Yo, That's My Jawn.
Nate, thank you for having me. This is awesome. It's been a long time coming.
It absolutely has. You know, you are one of my favorite people, not just at WXPN, but in general in the music community. So I am so happy that we're finally getting a chance to kind of do this on my show.
Yeah. I remember the first time I met you, was it either like non-com or was it at the Sing Us Home? And we've just been like swapping messages on Instagram for like months and months and months. And finally it was like, oh my God, our worlds have like overlapped to the point where like we can find a date to do this. So exactly. Hell yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Exactly. I'm super stoked. And like, you know, what I was kind of leading with there is I feel like personally, this is just my own opinion, that you are one of the most important people in the Philadelphia music scene, specifically because not only do you cover and go to so many local shows, but I feel like you perfectly kind of report on it as well. And so I love you for that, and I'm glad we're talking.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would do without concerts. I would probably read a lot of books. I think I really do enjoy reading, but oftentimes there's nowhere I would rather be than out at a show, and it's pretty nice that I'm able to like find a way that like this is part of my job. This is part of what I get to do for my career. I get to go to concerts and sometimes shoot photos of them and often write about them and do a lot of other things too. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, one of the things that's amazing is whenever I've seen you at a show or whatnot, is that not only, even if you're working, even if you're shooting, even if you're, you know, covering it or whatnot, I still see you absolutely enjoying it every single time. And that is so admirable because it's very easy to burn out and just like become jaded and like, yeah, okay, I'm at another live show, whatever. But like you always seem to be enjoying yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, I go to shows that I like. I go to shows that I'm stoked about. And yeah, I mean, I as someone who like never really was able to like do music at any kind of like a lot of times folks ask me like, oh, do you play music? Do you play guitar? And like, yes, I know rudimentary guitar. I just did this concert pick video where like I played Wonderwall. That's about the extent of my guitar playing right there. So like I've never really been able to do it like for myself, and I figure like the next best thing is just to like watch other people do it like really, really awesomely well and support them in other ways. Yeah, I mean it's part of the like I do that. Like I like working in the studio here and doing that. I like to like taking pictures of folks as they're doing it at shows. Yeah, I mean, it's a fun way to be involved in music when you don't have the skill to actually be involved in music.
Sure. Well, that's been my joke is like my music career failed, so now I just am going to help all of my friends' music careers do better.
Oh,
it didn't really fail, but you know.
What did you do you play like drums? Did you sing? What did you do?
I play guitar and I sing. My primary stuff was kind of like acoustic hip hop, kind of like a G Love kind of thing and stuff like that. Which actually I was going to mention. At any point, if you want to invite me to come down to the Key and do a session, I will gladly.
We'll consider that.
That's right. Put me on the long list. But before I get ahead of myself with all of this, let's jump in the Wayback Machine and let's get to little tiny Jawn growing up here in Ambler, which is crazy.
Yes.
So like you grew up in Ambler. Like what was your like household like musically? Like was there music always playing or?
I think I wish I had a better story about that, and I do think that like my family influenced my formative musical taste. Like I love Simon and Garfunkel. Like I have a cat named Garfunkel, so like I love like Simon and Garfunkel, and that is directly tied to like my mom when I was young would put in the Simon and Garfunkel tape and play it to help get me to go to sleep. You know, so I get Simon and Garfunkel from my mom. I get the Beastie Boys from my older brother. I get REM from my older sister. My younger sister like got me into like kind of more like the later 90s alternative stuff like Garbage and Soul Coughing, which was kind of like I was aware of that stuff, I think, just from being a little bit older than her, but not like her enthusiasm for it kind of made me give it a second chance. I was an angsty goth kid, except I didn't do the whole goth thing. I was an angsty goth, mentally a goth kid who dressed up like I do now in like shabby sweaters and flannels and like I was not I was really annoying to be around, I'm sure. But but no, like everyone around me kind of pointed me in some musical direction. Whether or not like I mean my family are all like in like my dad was an engineer, like my sister like is a nurse, my brother was like a marine biologist briefly until he became an educator. So it was like, you know, my family all kind of did stuff in like the sciences and I have no skill for that whatsoever. And so what I'm good at is like writing and shooting pictures and so I would kind of listen to the music that like my family listened to and like kind of find stuff on my own. Like Nine Inch Nails was the first like this is my band. Not that like I mean they were huge by the time I found them, but still like nobody in my family was really like into that, like into super angry loud early 90s mid 90s music. So it was like that was like and it kind of captured my very middle child vibe. So that was kind of my first thing that I kind of came to on my own.
I'm gonna real quick side note, mostly because I do this a lot because ADHD and whatnot. But from that time period, here's my band that I feel like why are we still whatever happened and why do we let them out of the conversation? Were you a Stabbing Westward guy? Because that first Stabbing Westward album was like my everything.
I want to say, I know that my friend Josh, who is another, like, so, all right, talking about musical influences, like, Josh was someone I connected with through high school. He was, like, a few years younger than me. Like, his older sister was actually in my grade. But, like, we were both into, like, really brooding music. So, like, he and I kind of bonded over that, but then he helped me, like, kind of discover all this other stuff, like Cockatoo Twins and, like, Jeff Buckley. And so I think that, like, by the time I was, like, late teens, like, about to graduate high school, my listening vibe was less locked in, like, the whole super angry, like, misanthropic whatever of my early teens and more kind of, like, cautiously optimistic and like a broader palette. But like Stabbing Westward was a band that Josh was hugely into. I remember they played the Trocadero when we were teens. I don't think I went to that show. I forget the name of their record that had the very long title. Help me out.
Wither, Blister, Burn, and Peel.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Wither, Blister, Burn, and Peel. Man, I'm gonna have to like dig up a track for that for What's the Frequency. Damn, yeah. I've not thought about Stabbing Westward in a really long while. So thank you, Nate, for that.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, but no, I mean, there's a lot of like that post Nine Inch Nails, kind of still indie / underground, but not as like aggro. Like there's another pretty good band called Sister Machine Gun that we really liked, that we would go to see them. I saw them a couple times at the Troc. This is more campy for sure, but do you remember My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult?
Oh my God, yes.
We saw them like 3 or 4 times at the Troc. I do not know why we were so enthusiastic about this band, but they put on like really fun, ridiculous live shows. And like when you're a teenager and like you're taking the train to Chinatown and you're walking over to the Troc and there's like this line of just like vampiric dressed people, and you go inside the club and there's all this dry ice smoke and there's these very doomy individuals on stage like dancing and doing this music. Like there's this element of like danger that's kind of exciting and also really fun and also like really positive.
Sure.
In a way. Like it was like a positive not outlet, but a positive avenue, a positive thing I could engage with when I was kind of like feeling generally not that way. Yeah.
I dig it. So here's my question. Being an Ambler guy, did you ever? It's twofold, and they're both in completely different directions. One, did you ever make it out to Lansdale for any of the hardcore shows? Because that was a scene for a while.
Once and once only. Because not a bad experience at all. It was more just like by the time I was aware that it was happening, I was living in the city, living in Philly, going to Temple, and mostly going, if I was going to see live music, I was going to see a show like around like downtown somewhere. But there's a photo I took, so I went to Temple for journalism and photography. And I was an English minor, so I guess I'm like one of the few people who you could say like went to Temple for journalism, and actually that's what I do.
Yeah.
But I went to Temple for photo, and it was one of the classes. I think it was like the second level photojournalism class where you were supposed to produce. There was an assignment where it was like produce a magazine photo feature. And so I had reconnected with a kid I went to high school named Jeremy Rosa, and he was in a band at that time. Like I knew him in high school playing in like death metal bands and stuff, like really heavy, like kind of satirical, but still just like blast beats and screaming and that sort of thing. And then he got into hardcore, and he was playing in a band called 13 PFP.
Heck
and
yeah.
Their claim to fame was that they were quote unquote PA horncore. It was like a hardcore band with ska horns, basically. And so I did this photo feature assignment going out to a show. I forget what the venue was. It was some VFW hall-esque place in Lansdale, and 13 PFP played, and it was like 7 other bands because of course they did. There was, because it was a hardcore show. But yeah, like it was a lot of fun. But it was just like, for me, a bit of a, like at that point in my life, living in Philly and stuff, it was a bit of a far drive. So I never really got further into the scene than that. But I did recently, I have all these old cassettes from growing up, and I'm like, every once in a while I'll bring a few of them into the station and like digitize them. Like, so that way, you know, they're gonna disintegrate and go away if they're not already like sounding crappy. So I'm trying to like save the stuff that I don't know is actually out, if it's actually out there anywhere. And I did that with their record Redefine, I think is what it's called. Really good. Like, I was like, oh, what's this gonna be like? I don't know. I remember this band. It was Jeremy's band. I did the photo thing on them. Like, I listened to it and like, oh fuck yeah, this holds up. Like, so yeah.
That's awesome. My buddy Mitch was in that band. Mitch Martinez, who
was the vocalist, right?
That's right.
Hell yeah.
We went to high school together. As a matter of fact, most of the people in those bands were people I went to high school with, and that's how I ended up in the scene, because I wasn't a hardcore kid, but I loved all of their bands. There was one band that I still to this day feel like would have blown up, and I feel and like there's a laundry list on why it didn't happen, but I don't know if you remember Chine. But they were incredible, and if you're digitizing stuff for the station, I have a disc for you, because they were phenomenal. Kevin Mooney, who's the bass player, was someone I went to high school with. Has gone on to a bunch of other Inkling and Drop Anchor, a bunch of other bands that are still playing around. But man, Chine was just something special.
That's amazing. Well, so you went up, or you grew up in Lansdale. What's it like for you? Like, it seems like we're about the same age-ish.
Yeah, I think I'm 2 years older than you, something like that.
Okay, cool. What's it like for you, or was it like maybe 15 or whatever years after you were involved in that scene to see a band like the Wonder Years blow up?
It confuses the hell out of me, to be honest. Like, it's so weird. I was actually just talking to somebody about it. I don't know if you saw, they shot a documentary recently about the Lansdale hardcore scene, and and it confused me because it was about like that era. So it was like right after I was done. So like I'm like, wait a minute, no, the movie. You want to make a movie? Go back a few more years. Like,
yeah.
But no, those guys are incredible too, and it's so amazing to watch them watch Dan, not just with the Wonder Years, but also like the solo album and the Aaron West project. Yeah. Like, it's just phenomenal to watch. Like, and there's a bit of like hometown pride to it. Like, even if like they release something that I'm just like, yeah, it's not for me, but like, hell yeah, I'm glad you're doing it,
Yeah. And the Wonder Years have the distinction of, so I'll preface this just in case any of your listeners aren't familiar. Part of what I do at XPN, of the many myriad things I do at XPN, one of the things that I am most stoked about that I get to work on is a thing called the Key Studio Sessions, which is it's a weekly-ish series where I bring in Philly bands to perform live in the studio. And it's like a total genre range. Like I've had, I had a band last year called Abacia that's like a Death Grips-esque like industrial hip hop band, and I've had like really gentle folk singers, and I've had jazz groups, and like it's really fun, and I love doing it. And I had the Wonder Years in, I want to say it was like 2017 or 2018. It was around the release of their album Sister Cities, and they hold the distinction of being one of, I think, 3 bands in the whole 12, 13 years that I've been doing this that came in and they did their entire session in one take.
Wow.
Like usually bands will come in and they'll play a song, they'll be like, oh, cool, we got it. And then they'll do their next song, like, actually, I didn't like how that ended. Let's do a second take just for safety. Or they'll be like, that was pretty good. Let's do another one just to make sure, And so these days, the average is bands will come in and they'll play each song twice. And I'll take the better one to use for like the video and the video that we post online and the audio that we put on the radio. But the Wonder Years, they like came in and they just kind of like, we did our sound checking and it was like, all right, you guys rolling? Cool. Boom. And they just like burned through the 3 songs and they're like, all right, we're good. See ya. And not in a rude way either. They just came in and crushed it, which was like really cool.
That's awesome. They're on their shit. They get it. So my second area question is, when you were in high school and in the area, what was your music store around here?
So there was a bunch of different places. Rainbow Records was probably my favorite. Rainbow, it's originally a Delaware store, and I believe it may still exist in Delaware, but it was based in I'm trying to think if it was East Norriton or Norristown, like where on the geographical boundary it lies. But it was basically at 202 and Germantown up that way. in that big shopping plaza. Shopping Plaza is still there. Diner that we used to go to, still there. Rainbow Records, not there anymore. But they were great because, oh boy, I'm pretty sure I talked about this with Dan on 25 O'Clock too. But do you remember import CDs?
Yes, of course.
And how like for instance, Beck would release the single for Loser. And there would be the US version, but then there would be like two different import versions that have slightly different B-sides. And like if you're a super Beck fan, as I was, you want to collect all of them. And so I would go to Rainbow Records, and they were always like really diligent about carrying imports and or being able to order stuff where it's like if you know this thing exists, but you don't know. We don't have it in stock, we'll get it for you, kind of thing. At least more so than the mall stores were. Like the Wall wouldn't do that. Love the Wall. Love their lifetime guarantee sticker on so many of my collection CDs in my collection. But they weren't the best for like special ordering. But Rainbow was, and they were like very like down to earth, independent, local-ish store. And they also carried bootlegs, which I loved. Like I would get like Nirvana like Trick or Treat Halloween bootleg of them playing the Paramount Theater in Seattle in 1991, or like the Nine Inch Nails demos and remixes compilation, which is like when Trent Reznor was like first starting out and like sounding like Erasure on his earlier songs. So it was like cool to like that they would carry this stuff that was like not entirely legal, but still like for like fans. And like they knew which bands had those fandoms, and they would stock that stuff. So Rainbow was really good. And then there was also a farmer's market off of 309, heading up to the Montgomery Mall, but not quite to the Montgomery Mall. Actually, wait. I think that's right. I think it was like heading to, but not quite at the Montgomery Mall. This big old farmer's market that had a combination like guitar / instrument / vinyl shop, and I would go there and I would buy old records. So those are my two go-to places. Yeah, so those are my two go-to places, and like I would build my collection that way, and or I would get a bunch of blank tapes and like copy from my friends, and like I would copy albums from Josh and like our friend Liam and our friend Michelle, and like we would just kind of build our collection that way. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was an import guy and I was a bootleg guy, specifically Pearl Jam imports because they always had the better B-sides on their imports, and Oasis imports because same thing. The B-sides were always like my favorite Oasis song of all time is "Talk Tonight," which was the import B-side to Wonderwall.
Yeah.
And then also on that import had their cover of "I Am the Walrus." So I miss those days.
My wife Maureen is a huge Oasis fan. She was a bigger Oasis fan when she was a teenager. I think as she grew up, we've talked about this on What's the Frequency in the past. Like she's come on the radio and played like guest DJ, and she aged out of Oasis and into Blur. And then all of Damon Albarn's various side projects and solo pursuits and things. And she still, I think, holds both of those bands in like super high regard. It's like Bowie, Blur, Oasis, all kind of like in her favorites. But when she was young, she really, really loved the Gallagher Bros. And she's kind of, as much as I thought I liked the band, she's kind of put me on to all these like deeper cuts and obscurities, and like, oh, you didn't know about the Nebworth gig in 1996? That's legendary. And I'm like, oh man, she's like amazing and has much cooler musical taste and knowledge than me. But no, she has. I think her favorite is "Round Our Way" is a good one.
One, yes.
And then one that I like that's kind of more so silly than anything else from Oasis is what's called Bonehead's Bank Holiday, where like they just let the dude Bonehead like sing a song, and it's kind of like freewheeling and just like goofy. But no, we have like a bunch of very like similar older Oasis B-sides and collections of semi-official nature.
Yeah, the Oasis. I've been. This is a topic I've been wanting to write about for a while now for the show. But I feel like Oasis and more so than them, REM. Are in this weird spot where they're legendary bands and they're enormous, but for some reason they aren't as big as I feel like they should be in the conversation. Like it almost like not that they're forgotten, but like it's like REM. But what a catalog. And then the same thing with like that 3-album span of Oasis. Like was everywhere. Like they were essentially what Radiohead is now at that time, like everybody was talking about them. And now I feel like nobody ever brings them up. It's weird.
I still see things like every once in a while, like Liam will say something cheeky about Noel in like some BBC interview, and then like The Guardian will take it and run with it, and it'll be a headline. And like, oh, is Oasis getting back together? Like Liam says, "Fuck no, never," or like and like they probably will invent. Like at some point, the money will be like way too much because it's weird. 'Cause, like they could probably, if Oasis toured, and Oasis toured the States. They could probably, if not arenas, they could probably do a stadium tour, which they never did back in the day, at least in U.S. And I feel like REM maybe doesn't put themselves out there as much. Like they're all like Peter Buck is doing like what's it called? Filthy Friends was the project he did with Corin Tucker. And the Baseball Project, which I've never really vibed with that, but I have like really good friends who like Joey O is like a huge Baseball Project fan. And it's like Joey's enthusiasm for that band makes me like that band, you know what I mean? But like Peter's just kind of content to be like, yeah, cool, I'm doing this goofy baseball song thing. And like they're good being like REM had its time and place and multiple decades, and that's done now, the end.
Yeah, it's wild. And like I feel like there's a bit of label issue there too, like because you would think like the label would keep them in the conversation, but like there hasn't been like reissues, there hasn't been like packages or anything like that. It's just like kind of like, yeah, all right, they're done.
Yeah. I feel like the last thing along those lines wasn't there a In Time, the Best of REM compilation of some sort? And this was like in the 2010s sometime, so it wasn't even recent.
Right.
Like it was pretty fresh on their breakup. And yeah, I mean but they're another band too where I think if like REM did decide like, yeah, you know what, we do want to play music again while we're still able to, like they would probably also do like, if not arenas, stadium. I mean, they were doing arenas by the time they broke up, and they had been for like a decade and a half. So they would probably be able to pull off like a bigger scale production. But I think too that like it's sort of commendable that they're not like the Rolling Stones and like we're gonna get out there and play stadiums every 2 years until we die. Like, which I'm probably going to see the Rolling Stones this year. So I can't knock them too much. I've never seen them, so I kind of would like to. But also, I think it's ridiculous that they're still touring and they've never stopped touring.
Yeah, I've never seen them either, and I feel like I have to because like I feel like at one point they're not going to, and then I'm going to be like, well, why didn't I go? Like what else did I have that was better to do than go see the Stones? Like,
yeah. It's like I should. It's like one of those like I feel like I should, and I will probably have a great time. You know what we were watching? We were watching something on New Year's Eve, Maureen and I, and we had it was either on Hulu or something where like there was those like interstitial like 30-second ad break. Here's a promo for whatever, and there was a promo for the Stones tour that's happening this year, like the Hackney Diamonds tour or whatever. And like I'm watching this, and it's like I guess footage from like a warm-up gig that they did in the UK, and it's just like looking at it, like so I didn't shoot shows that big until very recently. Like the first stadium show I ever shot was in 2022. It was the Red Hot Chili Peppers, The Strokes, and Thundercat at Citizens Bank Park. And I've shot like arena shows before. I've shot festivals, but shooting a stadium show, it's freaking crazy. just because like one, the level of security that like they have to put the photographers through to get there, and then once you get in like the photo trench and like you're waiting for the band to start, and like you turn around and you look just like you turn around, you just like sweep your head around the stadium, and there's like 50,000 people. It's just like weird and mind-boggling, and like man, stadium shows are crazy. And then like the Chili Peppers got out there and they're like playing like Californication, and all those people are singing along, and it's just like a huge rush. And like I know that like as like an indie dude or whatever, you're not supposed to like big festivals and big stadiums, but I love that shit. You know, I love the energy of those things that people can kind of collectively rally around. And so I'm watching this promo, and it kind of just gives me like a flashback to like when I shot the Chili's gig in 2022. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I should probably really shoot this concert. I should probably really try to get a photo pass for this concert. So I'm going to see. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I think it's like, this will probably be really fun. I'll go into it cynical and guarded, but it'll be really fun.
That's awesome. That's killer. And a perfect segue to something that was in my notes. I wanted to. You shot the Errors tour when they were in Philly.
I shot the Errors tour.
Philly,
Yeah,
right? How fucking insane was that?
Completely bonkers. Completely bonkers tour. Because I mean, that was even more people. That was the Link. So that was like what, like 70,000 or something, like 60 or 70,000. Like the Citizens Bank Park, I think, is 45 or 50,000. There's a lot of people. Like that's like 3 Wells Fargo centers, you know? Like that's insane. And like the actual shooting of it was, you're just like in that like photo trench, and like the show starts, and you're kind of trying to get your bearings and get your like light metering and like making sure everything is looking good. And then Taylor comes up on stage, like the riser comes up, and it's like, all right, I'm just gonna shoot a shitload of pictures and hope that something turns out good, because I only have like 2.5 songs right now. And so it's kind of like a blur. And for me, kind of like the real work is like more in the editing, and like the kind of, not editing in the sense of like going through and like manipulating pictures that are just okay to like look better, and more just like, here's 7 pictures that kind of are all of Taylor on this catwalk doing this pose. Which is the one that I think is the strongest one to kind of tell the story? And that's, for me, like, it's the harder part, but it's also one that I think I've gotten like decently okay at over the years. So for me, that's more of like the less the actual capture and more like the looking at the capture, like the stuff I captured post, and like arranging it to tell the story. But yeah, it was like, yeah, there was probably like 40 of us. My friend Lisa Schaefer was shooting as well. A bunch of people from like AP, and like people who had like driven in from like other neighboring states to cover this. Like, and you know, we had like I mean, technically it was like 3 songs, but 2 of the songs were like a medley. Like Miss Americana went into Cruel Summer, like it wasn't a full version of each, so it was kind of like a song and a half, and then the third song, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Which is fine, because I got no shortage of pictures, you know. It was perfect. And then they kind of, as soon as that last song that we shot, I think it was I'm the Man was the third one, because it started off on the Lover section of the show. As soon as I'm the Man was done, the press liaison person was like, all right, cameras down, let's go. And they zipped us out. And it was just like, oh, okay, cool. All right, bye. And then like they took us out through this like the area of the Met that is, or not the Met, the Link, excuse me. The area of the Link that is like, I don't know if it's like a VIP lounge or what, but it wasn't being used, and that was kind of like the staging area for press. And like they took us out. We had to give back our badges, because they had these huge ostentatious like press badges that we thought we were going to get to keep, but we didn't. And I think that has something to do with like there's like 4 or 5 different versions of them, and they switch them up from night to night. So that way you can't take a press badge from a previous night and show up at, you know, I think, don't quote me on that, but I think that's why we all had to give them back. I'm like, this is awesome. I wanted to keep this. It's like anyway. So like they kind of ushered us out the side of the Met. I went back to the XPN van, dropped off my camera, and then rushed back in to because they gave us press tickets too. So I went out to meet Maureen at our seats. And by that point, she was in like the Fearless section of the set, and she had just come out to like the far end of the catwalk, and where we were sitting was like the back of the field. So we thought that like, oh, she's going to be all the way up there. Like these seats aren't really going to be close. We're going to be more looking at the screens. But then the catwalk extended in such a way that like when she came to the end of the catwalk, she was like right there. And like, and again, like talking about like there was like maybe like 3 or 4 rows of people in front of us, and then the end of the catwalk. And again, talking about that like kind of collective energy thing, like when she's like walking out and dancing, and when the people in front of us could tell that she was approaching our side of the catwalk, just like the eruption in just like people screaming and cheering, like "Oh my god!" and like pulling up their phones and getting videos. I was like, "This is wild and awesome." I loved it.
That's the coolest. That is so cool. Yeah, I couldn't even imagine like what like the team that has to put all of that together. Like even just the function of getting you guys in and out, like the kind of clockwork and how they have it down like it's nothing to them. You know what I mean? Like it's wild. Yeah.
And then like I mean, I guess the difference is too that they were doing multiple nights in each city versus like doing Philly and then doing like DC the next day and then doing Atlanta the next day or whatever. Like they come to the city, they settle in, they do a 3-night run, then they have a few days off, and then they go to the next city. And those few days off is basically, I think, their crew transporting the entire freaking thing to wherever it is next. Because it's like one of the funnier things that I think from a commerce perspective is freaking brilliant. So my sister is a big Taylor fan. I don't want to call her a Swiftie because that's like there's negative connotations with that word. But Elaine loves Taylor, and she went down on Thursday. So if you remember, the Eras tour was Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Philly. And Thursday, the truck started coming in with like the stage setup, and in the midst of that was the merch truck. So like they drove in the merch truck on Thursday, opened it up, and people, including Elaine, were in the parking lot, like lined up and waiting to buy merch, like rather than trying to buy it at the show itself. I'm like, brilliant, brilliant! You are making so much money right now.
That's amazing. Back to the station, tying. Look at me, king of segues. One of my favorite things that has happened in probably the last decade was All Too Well, the 10-minute version, making the top. Forget what place it came in, but like me and my pals, we put a little campaign together trying to force
hell yeah.
everyone. Like everybody we knew that we were voting, we were like, hey, can you just pretty high up on your ballot put in All Too Well 10-minute version, Taylor's version, and make sure it's that version and the reaction from the community when it played was so all in or all out, and it was just my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, she was in that countdown in the 885 like more than most artists. Like she was all over, and I think that was really cool to see. Like that, whereas 10 years ago I remember like 10 years ago, like one of our former photographers, Rachel, shot the 1989 tour and did an amazing job of it. We posted a review, and the XPN Facebook audience was so mean about the fact that we were even at this show. And I think it's cool to see, like, 10 years later that people are kind of like, no, Taylor is awesome. Taylor's great. She has a whole lot of amazing songs and a vast catalog.
It's weird to me how polarizing she is, because like she's such an effective songwriter that like I don't understand like what there is to hate. And I understand overexposure affects everybody different ways, but like it's beyond me that anybody uses the word like talentless when they are just slinging things, and I'm like, where are you coming from?
I attribute that a lot to like, and again, like with the older guard of XPN members, like we, like back in the day, in like the late 90s and early 2000s, like our, like the way we kind of presented the station was, we're an alternative to what's going on Top 40 radio. We're the place where you're going to hear the artists that you're not hearing elsewhere on the radio, and we're the place that you're hearing artists for the first time that you will then hear a lot more of years later. Like, we're the first place you're hearing Nelly Furtado. We're the first place you're hearing Adele, whatever. And we are still that. I think XPN is still that. But at the time, we definitely, from a marketing standpoint, leaned into we have a bumper sticker on our studio wall downstairs that says "Life's too short for top 40," and that was kind of like one of our mantras for like years. And like I think a lot of the audience who's having that adverse reaction are folks who bought into that very literally and then feel betrayed that we're then playing. Whereas like everybody here, all the hosts are like, we're just people who love music and all sorts of music, and we're playing it for you.
Yeah.
And yes, of course we're going to play popular music because we want to bring in like, you know, a large range of listeners, and then we're going to play deep cuts too. Like it's that's what we do. But yeah, I think that like the negative reaction you see maybe stems a little bit from from the fact that like for the longest time we didn't do that.
Sure. Yeah. And no, I get it too. Like, you know, like I have old hater bones in me that I have been trying to quiet for the past few years, post pandemic mostly. Where I'm, you know, and that's kind of what the birthplace of this whole podcast and website was all about, was like I had become so jaded and cynical that like I wanted to actively change that. And so and that's what I've been trying to do. And one of the things that has really been exciting me about the growth of the station and kind of like, you know, the newer blood coming through and stuff like that, but even like, you know, even like Bruce and Dan, you know, is that like it has evolved into just a place that champions music, period. That there isn't, you know, some kind of like parameter of, you know, the fact that like John's Culture Cypher Radio is now a weekly show, you know, things like that, like absolutely excites me. And Rhythm Lab, you know, on Mondays and whatnot. I get really excited when people like things that and don't exclude things, you know, trying to be something, and but mostly because that was me. It's like the station's growing, I'm growing, we're all growing, like and I like the fact that, you know, that 88.5 countdown of women I thought was probably my favorite countdown that the station has done, and mostly because what it showed to me was that this argument that a lot of people have that like, you know, that like Phoebe Bridgers kind of talked about it at the Grammys, like that women need to try harder or whatnot. Like there was 885 reasons why that concept is bullshit, and I love it, and I love it, and I love what the station's doing now.
Hell yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you. And yeah, I love that we're a space where like you can hear, for instance, like I go back to Adele for an example. Like we played Hello like immediately right away when that single came out, but then we would also be playing like indie rock, like Local Natives or something, you know, who's not at that same level of like mass popularity. And then I was probably playing like early stuff from Hopalong at that point too, because at that point I was definitely on the local show and sharing the radio. Helen would do an hour and I would do an hour, so like I love one place that you can hear all of those things instead of one place where you're going to hear the same 20 things over and over and over. And then also, this came up during the conversations around the 885 Greatest Songs by Women countdown, as we were kind of like, we saw the votes come in and we saw what the list was going to be, and we're kind of like sourcing the songs that we didn't already have loading in the library and all that behind the scenes production stuff. We realized that like this list was covering, I guess it would be like 7 or 8 decades of music, like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. That's 8. And then I think we might have even had songs in there that went back to like the 40s. like you know, so it was just like we're a station that plays like let's just say it's like 8 decades of music. That is wild.
Yeah.
So.
It was beautiful. And like, even though like I'm still bitter because, look, the fact that, Be My Baby came in at like 142, Like, get out of here. Like, I want to find every single person who voted and didn't vote for Be My Baby being number one, and I want to fight them because that was my number one pick. But
Okay.
142. Get out of here. But no, you mentioned the local show. That's another thing that I think, and you are a big driver of this, and like Helen and Mike, now big champions of the local scene, and I feel like you've kind of, there used to be like Jackson's local shots on MMR, Y100 before that and stuff like that. I feel like you guys are like the last bastion of like championing this scene, and it's working out mutually, because like I feel like this scene right now is quite literally the strongest I've ever seen it in my life. Like, and mostly because there used to kind of be an edge, I feel like, to the scene where everybody was kind of out for themselves. Whereas now I feel like across genre, everybody is just propping everybody else up. And it's a beautiful thing to see.
I 100% agree. Like, there was so much when I got out of college in 2002, my first like real music related gig was I wrote for the city paper. And I had an intern there. I'd had an internship there under the music editor at the time, Pat Rappa, and he gave me a lot of opportunity. First, for just like write about records that you like, write about shows that you're excited about, and then every 6 months they would have a local music issue. It might have even been quarterly, but it was like some like recurring interval. Like every blank, it's X times a year, City Paper would do its music issue. And the first time I got to take part in that, Pat was like, yeah, you just like, what local bands are you excited about? Like, give me some pitches and I'll give you an assignment and you'll get to interview them. And so I did. And it was like my first real experience writing about like long form about local artists. And it was cool. So I just did more of that and kind of became more enmeshed in the scene. And at that time, it was like, not like, I mean, I guess it was like relatively, I would hesitate to call it cutthroat, but it was definitely competitive. Mm-hmm. And the scene is still competitive today, but I feel like there was a lot less warmth back then. Like, bands would share bills together at like the Khyber, for instance, and then one of them might land on a tour, and they might, get a label deal where the other one, who they had just gigged with 6 months before, is still playing the Khyber, and they'd be like, what the, like, a lot of resentment around like that sort of thing. And it was just like stupid. And like, I get it from like a working musician's perspective. Like, why didn't I take off like that? And like, sometimes it's just like a lot of like right place, right time, like right ability to like network and schmooze your way into like the industry sort of thing. But I feel like now there's more of like a, people like Philly musicians look at Philly and they're like, Mannequin Pussy's blowing up. Fuck yeah, I love Mannequin Pussy, or insert musician here. Like there's like Sweet Pill. Like, people will rally around these bands and artists and singers and whatever, because they're stoked to see folks from Philly kind of get national attention and love. But I think MMR still sort of does stuff with local folks. I know that my friend Sarah is a host there. And she worked with Jackson for a while. Now, who was it? Did Jackson retire? There was like a bunch of layoffs or something a year ago.
It was the layoffs, yeah.
Yeah. And so like that sort of ended what Sarah was working on at that time as far as like the local stuff that they were doing. But then I feel like she still pops up here and there, like championing local folks through them. And like, she's turned me on to a lot of artists like that. There's a hard rock band from like North Jersey called Soraya that like I never would have heard of had Sarah not been like, dude, you should check this band out, they're really great. So like they are looking out there, but there's not a lot of other places on like the commercial dial that really do. KDU definitely does, but they're a college station. Mm-hmm. I don't know that how much PRB really plays local music. They used to. There was a point where they used to, but I feel like it's like us, KDU, MMR to an extent, and RTI does a lot with local jazz artists.
Yeah. Well, and like, not like one of the other things, and we've kind of touched upon it, but like, I think bringing these artists in on the key and then that kind of ending up on, cause that ends up on NPR then, on the NPR site. And I feel like, it's just, you guys have created this kind of, this infrastructure, to be able to not just kind of champion people, for the listener base in the area, but like nationally, like it's putting this spotlight on some bands like our pals the Tisburys, like is a key example, like giving them an opportunity to kind of reach new ears that they never would have any other way.
It's been really fun to like both work with those artists and then like see those artists get opportunities like in the wake of us doing so. And I would never go so far as to like take credit for any of that stuff, but I've been told by more than a few musicians that like having those videos helps them when they're going out to do their next thing. Like I've heard Danielle from the band Grocer told me after they did a live session with us, they actually did one during our pandemic lockdown series where we were going out and just shooting live sessions at like various places around Philly. Our friend Matt Shank was doing mobile sound. It was like a whole vibe. It was fun. They were called the Unprecedented Sessions. But Danielle told me that like when they went to book their first post-lockdown tour, they would send all the venues like, here, look at this video to see what our live show is like. And they were able to kind of like connect dots between certain cities that they were playing on the road, like on the strength of like promoters being like, yeah, this looks cool, I would love to book you, So like I love hearing shit like that because it's like a lot of times it's like I'm producing it, I'm putting stuff up on my show, I'm putting stuff on the web. I'm like, I hope this is reaching people, and like you see the numbers to know that it is, but then to hear like the actual practical, like this is helping me, and like here's how. It's like it kind of makes me feel like, yeah, no, I do have a purpose. This is great.
It's awesome, and it's so admirable, and like seriously, like I think the work you guys do is so incredible.
Thank you.
So here's a question that I want to ask, because you are so entrenched in Philly local and stuff like that. It's a two-part question. First, who's the band who excites you the most locally right now? And two, who's the band that you can't believe didn't blow up, that maybe doesn't even do it anymore?
Okay, band that excites me the most right now, and still has yet to release their first like single to streaming services. So I'm a little like, I really hope this band does something. I know that they're working on something. They're called Cold Court, and I saw them play last fall. It was at the DIY Super Bowl event that the 4333 Collective put on every year. It was at the Yuki Club, and they were kind of like, they had done some shows for 4333 in the past, and I think like that whole crew of people that book stuff, like they very much to me feel like they're doing now what R5 Productions was doing in like 2002, 2003, as far as like nurturing like the DIY scene. And R5 is obviously still active and still doing that, but like I like how they're able to exist in like this complementary way, and like them kind of bringing in like a new generation and a new audience, et cetera, et cetera. So 43 very intentional about like booking local folks in the mix of all the other stuff they book too. And DIY Super Bowl is this thing they do every year, and I think it was mostly local this year, but like they kind of gave this band that they were really excited about, Cold Court, this like plum like center spot on the bill. So it's a 5-band bill, and they were playing third out of 5. So it was like the point in the show where everyone's going to be there and no one's left yet, and so it was like a perfect storm of like excitement and energy. And they get up there. I think it was like 5 or 6 people, and I liken them to like my takeaway from the set is like, wow, this is like at the drive-in mixed with like early Santana, like the jamminess of early Santana, but like the kind of like not wanky jamminess, like the more atmospheric psychedelia sort of thing. and then like it would kind of kick into these more like angular, aggressive, like fluid, like punk hardcore passages. Um, and they were just really, really rad. Like they had somebody who was doing like conga percussion and like keys and like a couple guitarists. They had a sax player. It was a really, really wild show, and definitely like one of the best like first impressions I got from a band last year. And they're all still very young. They're like, I believe, Drexel students for the most part, and then I think some of them might still be like late teens, like not in college yet. But they've gotten some good opportunities like outside of that one gig. Like they opened up for Black Midi at the first or at Union Transfer, excuse me. And from when I've talked to the band, they're working on recording their first singles that are going to come out sometime this year. And I know they're like very intentionally kind of trying to like get their music out there. And like I think they have a manager they're working with, which is always good. And I'm just really kind of excited to see what they do, like what their stuff sounds like when it's like, you know, when it's not live and when there's not the thrill of like 300 people kind of like just focused and locked in. When it's like you're alone and listening on your headphones, does it still have that same energy? And I'm kind of optimistic that it will, but I'm really excited to see what they end up doing with it. And then band that I wish had blown up and had not is a band called East 100. Do you remember them?
It sounds really familiar.
Okay, East 100 was a indie / modern rock band in like 2008, 2009, 2010. I think they broke up around 2012 or 13. But when I started volunteering at XPN, before I was here full time, before I was here part time, before I was like getting paid to be here, I was a volunteer. I came on at the same time as Joey O. We were both part of the Y Rock on XPN kind of family, and East 100 was one of the first bands that like we as a collective really kind of got behind. It was like 2009, and they were a little bit synthy, a little bit like jangly guitar rock. My go-to reference point for them is Metric.
Okay.
The singer Burrell, she is just like a powerhouse vocalist, and they made these really, really just great songs. And like some of them were more like spooky and atmospheric and dark, and some of them were just like pop bangers. And they played Non-Com one year. They played the festival. They made some records with Brian McTeer at Minor Street. And they were very committed to like kind of DIYing it as much as they could. Like they did all their own press. They self-released. They didn't really chase labels. And then, or maybe they did chase labels and they were just having a hard time, like a hard go of it. So they were like, fuck it, we're going to do this on our own. But they're a band that like, if the industry had kind of gotten behind them in the right way, they probably could have been huge. They were like super charismatic. They made great music. They were great people. And then I think like the whole going it alone kind of just like got to them after a while, and they're like, you know what? We're really proud of the music that we made, and we're still friends, and we're grateful for our time together, and we kind of want to leave it there.
Yeah.
But the two brothers that were in the band, Will the drummer and Brooke the guitarist, are now film score. They do film scores under the Blair Brothers. They do like horror movie, like the movie Green Room. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, but like they did the score for that movie, and they've done a lot of other. So that's kind of like their bread and butter these days. And I think they're kind of like, yeah, you know what, we're just going to do this thing where we're still working in music, but we're having a lot more success, and it's probably like a lot more creatively fulfilling knowing that like you're putting your heart and soul into this work and it's reaching people. But they were such a good band, and like. My friend and local predecessor Jake Rabid / Jake Neisenfeld, he did the local show for Y Rock when I first came on, and he and I kind of started working together on what would become the Key studio sessions. And Jake and I, like, it's still like our go-to reference point for like who should have blown up and didn't. East 100 for sure.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to look it up. Like that name sounds really familiar, and I'm probably going to recognize it when I hear it. But
Yeah, their song "Slow Burning Crimes" is a good place to start.
All right. I like it. At this time, you want to go through the Jauntlet? This is my questionnaire I ask all of my
Jauntlet.
guests. It starts with the one-hit wonders.
Okay.
First one, Billy Joel or Elton John? Who do you prefer?
If I'm being honest, Billy Joel. I know that man's catalog, unfortunately, by heart. And fortunately, I think he writes great songs. And I've only more recently kind of gotten into Elton John. But no, Billy Joel I grew up on. Maureen and I saw him last year at the Link, and that was like a 2-hour, 15-minute singing along to every song because like it's just like in my bones. Like he's another artist that I got from my mother. Would play me Billy Joel as a kid, and it kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, Billy Joel's one of those guys who, like, when people tell me they don't like him, and then, like, I just start playing songs, and I go, oh, well, I like this. And it's like, oh, well,
yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, I know you do. Like,
I mean, he's got some cheesy songs, for sure. But, like, the new song that he put out, so when we're at the point that we've recorded this for listeners, just last week, Billy Joel released his first new song in, like, 17 years. It's pretty good. It's like, it feels like he's trying to do, like, Summer Highland Falls, and it's not as good as when he did Summer Highland Falls in the 70s, but it's in that spirit, and I like it. But yeah, Maureen and I were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, it's a ballad. And she's like, oh, so is it like, This Is the Time? And I'm like, no, it's a good ballad.
Well, you know, my favorite Billy Joel fact, and you know, keeping it in Philadelphia, and you probably know this, but maybe you don't, is that Chuck Treece played bass on River of Dreams.
I did not know that. Whoa. Chuck Treece is amazing.
Yeah. And what's wild about that is the way I found out about it was, I want to say it was like an interview with like the Metro. Like all I remember is I read it when I was on the train, and he was talking about, he was in Dorney Park with, and I'm going to guess it was Kieran with his kid. And in the article, he's like, you know, and the River of Dreams comes on over the loudspeaker, and I tell him, you know, that's me playing bass. And my kid was like, so? And, but Chuck is one of those people who I have been for 3 years trying to schedule an interview, and we've gone as far as to sit down at one point, and he couldn't connect to his Wi-Fi, and so he was like, we were like, oh, we'll do it tomorrow, and then every single time something comes up and it falls through. So he's become my like the Matt Damon to my Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, I hope it comes through though at some point. It will. And he's just incredible. Like he is so connected to so many and I don't mean like, oh, he's so connected in like a kind of skeezy industry way. He just is a super talented person who has played with everybody. And it's like you could draw like a Chuck Treece like what's it called? I don't know what the name of that diagram is, but like where it's just kind of like branching out to like different, like, oh, he's like Chuck Treece worked with this person, with this, you know, and in Philly and beyond. He's awesome.
Yeah, I'm big, like, and like, it's so funny because I actually, people listening, this is in the past, but I just saw him playing with G Love like 2 weeks ago, and I was backstage and I was going to corner him to set up this interview, and he literally was like, "Hey, what's up?" And he took off, and I was like, "God damn it." But another guy from Ambler, he's living in Ambler, so like,
that's amazing. Yeah, was that one of those city winery shows?
Yeah, the Friday night show.
Hell yeah. I'm sorry if this
killer.
I'm sorry if the Jauntlet is supposed to be more like rapid fire and I'm like being long-winded about it.
No, it never is. It was originally designed that way, and I gave up thinking that because I go off on these side tangents and bring up topics that aren't even a part of it, and then I forget what I'm doing. But thanks for reminding me. Number 2, Debbie Harry or Joan Jett?
Oh man, Joan Jett is such a badass, but I'm going to go with Debbie Harry just because seeing Blondie at Non-Com and then seeing them at Exponential was just like, man, like Debbie and this band are such a force, and they're similar to Billy Joel, where it's like this music is kind of like in my psyche. Like I just had so many Blondie songs in rotation, more so in college. I think I kind of came to them a little bit later. Like when I finally decided to like listen deeper than Heart of Glass, I'm like, oh shit, this band has great great songs. Like I definitely gravitate more towards Blondie, and Debbie. So
I dig
for
it.
sure.
I dig it. Aretha Franklin or Tina Turner?
Aretha, because the Amazing Grace documentary. Have you watched that?
I have. It's in my queue, and I still haven't gotten a chance to sit down and do it.
It is, wow. Like it's. I mean, yeah. It just kind of hearing her returning from the quote unquote secular music world to singing gospel music again, and then like hearing it so like I mean she is obviously like the featured vocalist in this concert, but she's also like part of the bigger ensemble, and it's just like so powerful. And I'm not like the most religious person ever, but it's like so powerful and moving, and like wow, it definitely worth a watch with a good sound system in place.
Dig it. I'll move it. I'm moving it up on the queue as we speak. The next one, Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
I'm sorry to keep going with number one in your options, but Nirvana. And back in the to kind of take it back to like the bootleg conversation from earlier. So yeah, 1993, 1994 me was all about Nine Inch Nails and Nirvana, and I guess kind of in the wake of Kurt's passing in '94, 30 years ago, which is wild. There was kind of like an uptick in like tape trading, and I was on Prodigy at the time, and and I was like 14 or whatever, and 14 or 15. I'm 45 now, so I'd been 14 or 15, and like going on like alt music Nirvana, and like wanting to basically this started because I wanted to learn Nirvana songs on guitar. And people were referencing all these other Nirvana songs that I had never heard, like what is Sappy, what is Spank Through, and then so people were like, oh well, you can tape trade, and I'm like, what does that even mean? And so I remember it started with getting, I forget what I traded or if I just paid the person to get this like Nirvana in Milan in February of 1994. Terrible quality audience recorded bootleg, and that was my first bootleg cassette and my first Nirvana bootleg. And then like tape trading is like, well, what do you got that I don't have? Oh, you have this Milan tape. I'll trade you this Milan tape for this rarities compilation. And then like, oh, you have two tapes that you can trade now, and then kind of just builds and snowballs from there. So I think at one point I had upwards to like 100 Nirvana tapes, and then I realized that I don't need all these like maybe 100 is an exaggeration. Maybe it was more like 70, but it was a lot. It was definitely in the higher double digits. And then I realized I kind of don't need all these like questionable sound quality, questionable performance quality tapes. Like when I kind of wound down on the tape trading thing. So I condensed it, and now I think I have like 20 to 25-ish. And they're like the shows that I would actually return to and listen to more than once, So it was like this recording of them playing in Tacoma, Washington in 1987. Like, that's pretty cool. Like this recording of them playing in St. Petersburg, Florida in November of 93. This is really good, and it's insanely good quality. And it's like Kurt Cobain, like kind of in the throes of his, like, what he was going through at that time of his life. But still at that particular gig being warm and funny and outgoing, and like a side of him that like you don't really see because either it wasn't the narrative the press wanted to tell, or it was just like not how he was at that time. And it's like, this is fun, Kurt. I like this. Like, I will never get rid of this tape. So it was like the ones that kind of I would come back to for whatever. The Trick or Treat one was another one. So yeah, Nirvana for sure. Sorry, I give such long answers.
I love it. No, I love it. What are the chances of us getting some of that on what's the frequency?
Oh, the bootlegs? You know what? Maybe, because I am planning something. I do not know what yet for to mark the anniversary of his passing in April. And maybe some of it might be live. But also, I for the longest time, I like didn't play unofficial stuff. Like I would only play like albums and B-sides and things that were like properly released. And I did break that recently for the first time in January of 2024. Every January, What's the Frequency would fall when I was doing it monthly. It would fall during Philly Loves Bowie week, And so I was like, what can I do this year that's a variation on 90s Bowie that I haven't already done? And it wound up being like Maureen gave me this recording she had like late last year. She was like, oh, you didn't hear this this tour that they did without Nine Inch Nails? I'm like, oh, I was aware of it. I just didn't go because I was a cranky Nine Inch Nails fan who didn't want him playing to like big audiences. And like I felt like he had sold out, so like, and she was like, "You should listen to this. It's a really good bootleg." So like I listened to it, and it's like this soundboard ass recording of like this amazing like. So all right, tangent. Do you remember that tour, the Bowie Nails Outside tour?
I didn't go, but I do remember that tour. Yeah.
Okay, so I was not aware until Maureen gave me this recording that this is the format of that tour. Instead of opening band, which was Prick, I think, and then a break, and then Nine Inch Nails, and then a break, and then David Bowie. The Prick played, then there was like whatever, and then Nails got on stage, and they played like a 45, 50-minute-ish set, and then at some point towards the end of their set, members of David Bowie's band, and then David Bowie himself came out on stage, and they did like 5 or 6 songs together. Half of them are Bowie songs, and then half of them are Nine Inch Nails songs. And then Nine Inch Nails exited, and Bowie took the show from there and played the rest of it. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like that, I'm like, why did I not go to this tour? And then like his set list, like the Bowie set list was like really, really good. Like they closed on this particular recording, they closed on Teenage Wildlife, which I think is from Scary Monsters. I'm like, this song is amazing. Like, so yeah, like I wish I had gone to that tour. Did this all stem from Nirvana versus Pearl Jam, by the way?
Certainly did.
I'm sorry, Nate.
Don't ever apologize. That's it.
Back on the Jawnet.
Janis Joplin or Stevie Nicks?
Stevie Nicks. All right. Second one. Hell yeah. I like Janis. I think I like Stevie's songs more. And I think of the songs in the Fleetwood Mac songbook, the best ones are Stevie's. And then I saw Stevie last year at that Billy Joel show. It was like Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks, and like Stevie's set was as good, if not. I don't know that I would go so far as to say better than Billy Joel. I think they were equally good. Maureen definitely thought Stevie Nicks was better. And I respect that.
That's awesome. I'm part of the XP Zennial Caucus. Shout out to our friends.
Yep.
But we hyper focused and have all talked about the 97 performance of Silver Springs. How it's like one of the greatest moments ever, which is the Stevie Nicks staring down Lindsey Buckingham while singing it on stage. It's the most amazing thing in the world.
And that's the one that's been like memed of like, yeah.
Yeah, and now
awesome.
they're like selling shirts of it. It's great. I love it. Beatles
awesome.
Or the Stones?
If I'm being honest, the Beatles. I definitely probably like other bands of that era more. Why is the Velvet Underground never in that question? You know what I mean? But like, I mean, I get it. I Beatles, another band I got from my mom, and I think because of that I always associate them with childhood, and not to say that the Beatles didn't make great songs, because they certainly did. Made amazing songs, amazing records, but also I kind of am like, why are we still talking about the Beatles? But then I'm like, oh right, because they're awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I definitely get it. I don't even remember who I was talking to about this recently, but I was saying that like I don't know. It's the Sgt. Pepper's thing, right? Like I don't know that people vote Sgt. Pepper's anymore as the best album ever, or if they're just like, well, I have to say that because that's what we say. You know what I mean? Like so, like I wonder, like and look, all right, I'm not taking away from everything they did musically, and
right.
They changed music, right? But like, how many people are really like, nah, let me put on the Beatles? That say that they love the Beatles. You know what I mean?
But then also, how many people are going to be somewhere where the Beatles comes on and they're going to be like, let's change this,
Right.
So it's kind of like this, and I think to your point about like the Sgt. Pepper thing, it's like I think that this is something we see a lot in like the voting for top whatever's songs, albums, is kind of like sometimes there is like universal consensus, like with the 885 greatest songs by women, it was like far and away, like top 10 were the top 10, you know what I mean? But then sometimes it's like, and I find this more as like when I'm working with my writers or whatever on like albums of the year, sometimes it's like people will, like an album will rank very high, and I don't want to name names because I like the artists too much to whatever, but like an album may rank very high, but nobody had it at like their number 1 or their number 2. It was like a lot of people's number 7, number 8, but because it was a lot of people's, it kind of bumped it up in the thing, versus but then on the other side, sometimes one album being one person's number 1 will push it higher than whatever. So anyway, the consensus is weird. That's the point I'm trying to make there.
I get it. No, it's true. And it's very weird because every album of the year list that I saw, including your guys, clearly missed the boat because none of them had what was my number 1 album of the year, which was After Hours by Ali and AJ. But anyway, I digress. It's a really good album.
That's all. Okay. I do not know that one. So
Ali and AJ Michalka are the Disney Channel actresses, and they put this album out After Hours, and it's really good.
Okay, cool.
It's a vibe. Check it out. The last one of the one-hit wonders, Bohemian Rhapsody or Stairway to Heaven?
Bohemian Rhapsody. Just on the vocals alone, plus like the Wayne's World adjacent nostalgia. So in my concert photography, I go to, at least when they still had it, hopefully they bring it back, but the Firefly Festival, always really fun to go to in Delaware. And the last one I went to, Green Day headlined one of the days. And their whole thing to like get the crowd like hyped up before they take the stage is they play like the schlockiest classic rock stuff. To kind of, but it's stuff that like people know all the words to and know all like the melodies too. So it's like they're playing like Seven Nation Army or like Smells Like Teen Spirit or whatever. And they play Bohemian Rhapsody, and without prompts, everybody starts singing along and doing all like the Wayne's World gestures and stuff. And then when it comes to like the crescendo, everybody just, again, without prompt, knows to start headbanging. And it's like, I love that it kind of took on a life of its own like that, a decade and a half after it was actually released, and that it still has that life. It's wild. It's a phenomenon. And it's a great song.
Yeah, it's pure magic. Like I tell people about this a lot, but one of my favorite memories at a live show ever wasn't even like really a performance. It was something similar to that, and it was. Did you go to Live 8?
No. I remember the summer that it happened because I remember I was down on the Parkway like a month beforehand because I think the fireworks concert that year was Elton John.
Yes.
Taking it back to Elton. Didn't get into him till later, but like I saw that concert and I remember being aware of Live 8 and not going because I think I had the not greatest experience biking down to the Parkway to go to that show. But anyway.
But so Will Smith was the MC of the event. And Jeff was there and doing like interludes and stuff like that. And at one point he was like, I think there's like there's reportedly 1 million people here. And I just want to test something out. And he just goes, in West Philadelphia, born and raised. And then 1 million people rapped the theme song of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, unassisted. Amazing. And it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. Like I couldn't imagine like creating something and then being like, okay, 1 million people, go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's cool. It's super cool. The next section, the top 10 countdown. Of course, Jawn can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be music. Number 1, what was your first Jawn? What was the first thing you were obsessed with as a kid?
Star Wars.
Same.
Yeah, for sure. I have pictures of me wearing like sheets of brown cloth kind of tied over my head as though I were Luke Skywalker in the beginning of Jedi, like the hoodie cape thing. Yeah. Loved it. So much fun. Still love it. So much fun. Last night before my wife and I went to the Mitski concert last night, we stopped at Prohibition Tap Room, and they were showing the trilogy on the TVs for whatever reason. And it was just like, oh my God, like, do we want to stay here and like watch like a little bit more? And then like it got to the end of A New Hope, and like the way the Death Star exploded with like the ring going out was like, okay, these are the special editions. These are like the not original versions, whatever. But still cool. Still love it.
It's. I love that. I love that. And you're saying that to a guy who got married dressed as Han Solo.
Oh
to
my
a woman
God.
dressed as Princess Leia. So.
Oh my God.
You're in good company. Number 2, what's your current Jawn? What are you into right now?
Oh boy. Aside from the Philly music scene, of course, this is a tough one. Cause like I read a lot of books, but I don't know that there's any particular series that I've been like honing in on. Like, oh, gotta read all of whatever. ... I guess maybe just like just the idea of reading. Is that okay? Is that a good answer?
Absolutely.
The idea of reading?
Yeah, very much.
Because
so.
no, I during lockdown I got into using my Goodreads again, and I've managed to the past 3 years like set these Goodreads goals and meet them, which has been a lot of fun. And last year, like Maureen and I have a lot of books, and last year I made a point to kind of like, okay, here's all the books on our fiction shelves that I've never read. So that's part of my Goodreads goal this year is going to be reading all of them and like getting caught up on this section of the shelves. And now I'm into like musician bios. So like I have coming up, there's a Graham Nash book, like his memoir I'm going to read. For Christmas / my birthday, Bruce Warren got me the Lol Tolhurst book, Goth. So I read that. That was a really good read. So yeah, I guess just kind of like, so this year's going to be a lot of musician and artist bios, but I think, just reading in general. That's good.
I dig it. I can definitely dig it.
Evergreen for sure.
Yes, very much so. You're talking to somebody who I used to work for Harvest Book Company in Fort Washington. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they were the largest used and rare book reseller on the East Coast for a while, and it was the best job I ever had in my life.
Wait, where would that have been like on Commerce Drive or whatever?
It is, yeah. It was right on that corner bend, right as you make that turn before you get to what was the subway and is now whatever it is there.
Dude, I worked across the street from you at Montgomery Newspapers for like years. That was like my first job out of college. If I'm thinking geographically of the same area, that turn where there was like a hotel across the street that had a subway in it, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's wild.
Weird job, but cool job.
Yeah.
No, for me.
For you. No, like being surrounded by books, it like was probably when I was at my most creative too. Like it just was just an inspiring job to be. And like I self-published a book that no one can find, but it's up on Amazon if anybody truly wants to find it. But it's not good. But that was probably the most creative I've ever been, was in that period when I was working there.
Nice.
Yeah. Number 3, what was your first concert? What was the first live show you saw?
My first live Jawn was Nine Inch Nails, Jim Rose Circus, Marilyn Manson at the Spectrum in 1994.
That's killer.
And I remember being completely terrified because my friend who I went with, he had a ticket for himself and his brother. And then they're like, oh, do you want to go too? So then I thought they had an extra ticket and I would have been sitting with them. And what they wound up doing was getting an extra ticket for me that was in the upper deck that I then paid them for, of course. But then like we got there and they're like, okay, we're sitting down here. You're up there somewhere. See you later. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And I'm like 14 years old. This is like one of the first times I'm like off on my own, in like a big concert setting. And kind of scared shitless. And then like I got upstairs, upper nosebleeds where my seats were. And Marilyn Manson got up on stage, which in retrospect, it's like, dude is super campy and like provocative in like a like theatrical way, but like I didn't know that as a child, and I'm like, this is terrifying, and then like but then like kind of exhilarating, and then like between that set and then Jim Rose, we went downstairs or I went downstairs and I found the section that my friend and his brother were in, and I just like ran down, like squoze into a seat next to them, and just stayed there for the rest of the show, and nobody questioned it. So, yep.
That's awesome and super memorable. I love it. I love it. Number 4, I think you just answered, was Mitski, last concert last night, right? Yeah.
Yep, Mitski, Tamino.
See, and it's funny because with you, I leading into this, I was like, I bet John's last concert is going to be the night before I do this interview, and of course it was.
Yeah, and then by the time you air the interview, it'll be somewhat out of date for sure, because I probably will have seen like another handful of concerts as well. But no, Mitski with Tamino at the Met, the first night of their 2-night sold out run. It was very. It was very different from previous times I've seen Mitski. Like, she's kind of moved her performance in more and more of a theatrical direction with each tour and with each album. And the previous time I'd seen her was the Franklin Music Hall, which was like super high energy, like loud rock songs, loud dance songs. She's like racing from one side of the stage to the other. And the new record that she's touring off of now, it's called The Land is Inhospitable and So Are We. Very mellow. And the performance was accordingly also very mellow and cinematic, and like definitely felt like the band was playing like Western music, like music for Westerns, like movies. And then what they did too was like her back catalog. They kind of like adapted the songs to these new arrangements. So like one of like I Don't Smoke was like a hoedown song. There was a song that was like a samba song. It was like really kind of cool to see her doing, like, it was not the show I expected, I guess, but on an artistic and creative level, I really, really admire it. Yeah.
That's awesome. I dig it. Number 5, I'm sure it's a hard one for you to pick, but what was your favorite concert?
I think Radiohead in 2017, which is the last time Maureen and I went abroad, in Manchester, England, at a cricket stadium. And so it was, oh man, let me try to tell the short version of this concert. We were planning, like, we travel as much as we can. We're planning a trip for later this year that I'm kind of stoked about. It's going to be our first time out of the country since 2017. But we decided to plan this one particular trip around a couple big concerts. So we saw the Stone Roses in Glasgow at the one end, and then the other end we got tickets to see Radiohead, and they were doing 2 nights at this arena, like indoor arena in Manchester, and we got tickets to the first night, which was the 4th of July. This arena in question is the arena that was bombed during the Ariana Grande concert. I don't know if you remember that happening.
I do, yeah.
It's a thing that happened, and it was like really terrible. And so they basically just stopped down and like stopped having any events at this place. And it was kind of like, what's going to come of these Radiohead concerts? And basically what they did was they took the 2 Radiohead concerts that were in an arena and combined them into one Radiohead concert in a stadium and honored all tickets and all that stuff. And so like when we were not even sure if like it was still going to fit in like the window of us traveling, and thankfully it was still on the same day. It was still on the 4th, and we wound up having GA tickets, which was amazing because we were like, again, stadium show experience. Like, we're out on the field and they're doing like Karma Police, and everyone is singing, you know, For a Minute There I Lost Myself, and it was just like, oh my god. And then the show gets done, and you know, we're all walking back to our various, like the light rail or like the bus, or like I think we just basically straight walked back to our hotel. It was like a longer walk, but it was like a nice night. And like as the crowd is leaving the stadium, everyone is still singing For a Minute There I Lost Myself. And it was kind of, that was magical for sure. And the band was just like, I don't know, they're just such a good live band with a great catalog. And they make good use of it at that show for sure.
Yeah, I need. It's a moral imperative that I see the next time they come to town. Smile, just based off of how much I love this new album. Which I liked the first album a lot. It was really good, but this one, start to finish, like just I started imagining what it'll sound like live, and it excites me beyond belief.
Nice. And that band, they perform as a trio, right? Like they don't really, like they keep it stripped down, whereas Radiohead, there's like 6 of them. So yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Number 6, who have you never seen live that you wish you would have? They can be living or dead.
Nirvana. I think part of the reason I go to so damn many concerts, is Nirvana was my favorite band in high school. And I remember my freshman year of high school, so 93, 94, I was a freshman. My freshman year of high school, a bunch of my friends and peers and fellow classmates and whatever went to see Nirvana at the Civic Center, and they came back the next day and they were wearing all their In Utero swag, and I'm like, oh my god, you got to see Nirvana. I wanted to go to see Nirvana. And like other people, or I'm sorry, it was at the Drexel Armory. It wasn't the Civic Center. And then other people went to see them at the Stabler Arena in Bethlehem. And I'm like, oh man, I wish I had seen Nirvana. And then we know how that story ended. And I never got to see Nirvana. And I was kind of like, well, I want to make sure I see as many fans as I can, because I missed out on my favorite band as a child.
Yeah, that's how I feel about so many. There's so many bands like that. Like I remember Elliott Smith was playing, I want to say like the Troc or the TLA, and I was like, I'll catch him next time. And then like 2 months later, he was gone. And I was like, shit. Like,
yeah.
Chris Cornell was another one, because they did that Temple of the Dog tour right before he passed away.
Yeah, that was at the Tower, right?
Yeah.
Or was it some? Yeah. Like I remember my friend Joe. I think my friend Joe Del Tufo photographed that show. He at least photographed a Chris Cornell related show. And I remember being aware of the show and like thinking like, oh, Joe got some really sick pictures of the show. I should see next time a Chris Cornell project comes through town. And then nope. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bummer, man. Number 7, name an unappreciated Jawn, something you wish had more shine to it.
This is going to require some pondering. And it can be anything. It doesn't just have to be.
Yeah.
Okay. I wish more people knew about ... I'm taking this in a not entirely expected direction, but I wish more people knew about Ridley Creek State Park. It's in Media, Pennsylvania, and it is basically a big old state park with like hiking trails and like, I forget if it's like a lake or like there's some kind of body of water that like is in there, but then there's also like a ton of, it's a creek, Creek, Ridley Creek. There you go. State Park. Way to go, John. But no, it's gorgeous and it's great. There's like this huge network of trails where you can do like a hike, like a day hike, and that's something I really love doing. Like, just kind of like checking out, turning off my phone and going out hiking or whatever. Like sometimes I've more recently gotten into the beach, but hiking is always like kind of my go-to favorite. And yeah, it's just like this network of trails where you can do like a easy, like maybe half mile or like 3/4 of a mile loop and only be out for like an hour. Or you could, like the last time Maureen and I went, like we had planned, like there was like an all trails variation on their map, where you could do a big loop that kind of is 3.5 miles, but it's like this loop connects with this loop, which connects with this one, and it's like you're out and around, and then you're gone for almost like 4 hours. And like, man, let me tell you, like going out into a bunch of trees for 4 hours, and all you hear is like the birds and bugs, and you don't hear cars driving by, and you're just with somebody whose company you enjoy, and it's like the chillest, nicest day. It's like, I love that.
That's awesome. Yeah, my wife and I, we hike a lot, so I'm going to have to add that to our list of places to check out.
Nice.
Number 8, and a tough one, favorite album.
Wow. I did make a, there was like a meme years ago that was like albums that change your life. It was like when people started using like the, before Instagram really let you do the carousel, but like could let you make a grid on a single square post. Like there was like a thing that people were doing that was like, here's 9 albums that changed your life in like the square. I would say either OK Computer, which is such a cliche answer for somebody of like my age, just in the sense that like it really like I talked earlier about how I was like angsty and very goth and Nine Inch Nails oriented and bands that sounded like that, and then like my taste in musical worldview started like blossoming, and like that was definitely a record that like really blew it up in a big way into like other sounds and other scenes and other artists of like lots of different eras. And I think I found out about a lot of music in the wake of that I wouldn't have 5 years earlier. And it's a solid record front to back. So I think that, and then on the Philly level, I would say Things Fall Apart by The Roots, which is just their masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. And also I was my second year at Temple when that came out, and You Got Me was such a big hit. And like they're a band that I'd liked previously. Like I saw them open for the Beastie Boys at the Civic Center in '95 or something, and that was my first experience with them. Like, whoa, this band is wild. And then I really liked their Illadelph Half-Life record, and so I was like, oh, new record from The Roots, like yeah, my favorite local band or whatever. And then like You Got Me became like this global hit, and it was kind of like the first Philly band that I think the first Philly band I liked was probably the Goats, but the first Philly band that I was really kind of like cheering them on as they blew up was definitely The Roots. And like that record is just like so like profound and emotional, and like kind of giving voice to things that like I as a teenager from Ambler did not understand. And then also talking about like music industry culture and celebrity culture in a way that like again I as somebody who was not involved in this didn't understand. So it's kind of like it made me proud that a Philly band was succeeding, and it also kind of like broadened my worldview in a as I guess that's in its way. So yeah.
No, I love that. I love that. So I got to ask, did you ever post on OK Player?
I didn't know. I think at the point that OK Player was taking off, I was probably burnt out on message boards from having spent so much time like as a angsty teen on like Prodigy adjacent message boards. And like even though it was like different, I think I was kind of like associated message boards with that, and I kind of didn't really I think I was aware of it, and then I became aware of it later as a magazine and a website more so than like a culture website, more so than like a like networking kind of place. And I kind of like in retrospect, like hearing John Morrison talk about OK Player and like all the people he connected with there and how it really propelled him creatively and like inspired him kind of makes me wish that I had participated more. It probably would have like escalated my hip hop education in a way that like, I like stuff that I heard that I was hearing for the first time in my late 20s, I probably could have heard like a decade earlier if I had been more active there. But at that point I was kind of like, nope, not touching message boards. Sorry.
It was wild. It was a wild space. And actually, I think John and I have talked that we are pretty sure that's how we first ever talked before we knew who each other was. So
that's amazing.
It's wild.
Oh,
yeah. Number 9, name an artist whose output you'll consume anything they put out.
Oh my God. I mean, I think The Roots again, because even if it's a record, like I think their last record, which I think was called And Then You Shoot Your Cousin.
That's it.
I don't think it was the most accessible record. Like it didn't have like, like the way How I Got Over had all these songs with like John Legend hooks and like really easy like entry points, or even like Undone, which is more like mellow and contemplative, but still had like Make My, which is like I think one of their like it's up there in the Roots canon. And Then You Shoot Your Cousin didn't really have that. It was kind of more of like almost an art piece than a record, or like a song cycle, if you will. And maybe I just need to spend more time with it and find those points of connection. But fuck, man, I love listening to it. And whenever they put out their next thing, which I didn't go to Roots Picnic last year, but I went the previous year when Mary J. Blige played, and they opened their set with like these new songs that I had not heard before that were very like disco influenced, and I was like, if this is what the new Roots album sounds like, I'm all in. That's cool.
That's awesome.
So yeah, the Roots for sure.
One of the things you should dig in the archives there, if you've never heard it, is Questlove did this thing, Philly Paris Lockdown. And it should be in the World Cafe archives, I think.
Okay.
But it was at the Kimmel Center, and he did it with I forget who all he was working with. Like Karen Ann was there, but it's this beautiful, beautiful. Like he took classical pieces and kind of put kind of hip hop breaks behind it and stuff like that. It's really, really incredible. He's one of those people who he's one of my stretch goals as a guest on here, because we used to be passing acquaintances, and I was in frequent contact with him, and then I started this, and now I don't talk to him anymore, and I'm like, now you have an Oscar, and I'm probably never going to talk to you again, but
you should still try it. And it's like one of those things too, where like the more you can kind of like bring people into your circle that this person is aware of, the more like, Questlove might not know you, but he knows Chuck Treece. So when you do land that Chuck Treece interview, which I'm confident you will, like that's the point of like, oh shit, Chuck did this.
Yeah,
maybe I should think about it.
Like it'll happen. I've already hit one of my stretch goals, which was G Love, and now we're like weirdly kind of friends or something. I don't know. It's weird.
That's cool.
So my 3 stretch goals it was G Love, Questlove, as I said, and I like to say these a lot because I'm trying to manifest them. I like to say them to manifest them, and the big one is Jawn Oates. I need Jawn Oates because Jawn Oates is from North Wales, and I'm from North Wales, and I feel like we could talk about that for an hour. On
the subject of like not that I've become friends with this person, but just that this person acknowledged my existence. And it's like maybe not even as big of a deal, but like remember how I said like my first Philly band that I was really psyched about was the Goats.
Yeah.
And their record Tricks of the Shade was like huge for me, not only as like it was chock full of bangers, it also definitely helped like informed my political consciousness as a teenager. And I think you want to go back to like the who didn't get their due, or who's somebody who should be more people like I think it was Jawn 3 that was like, what do you wish had more shine to it? I wish more people on a musical level, to answer that question, not from a Ridley Creek State Park level, but from a musical level, I would say I wish more people knew about the Goats, because they're ahead of their time. You can put on Tricks of the Shade and they could be singing about the world now, like today. And it's like I wrote a thing about a live album that they put out. It's like a Live at the Khyber Pass release that's on their Spotify that they released a couple of years ago. And I said something like that either says a lot about how like their perceptiveness and foresight in 1992, or how not far we've come as a society since 1992, But I wrote this piece about this live record that they released, and I was kind of like using it as like a more people should know about the Goats. And like Max used to do Black Landlord. That was one of his post-Goats projects. I don't know that he does music anymore. Odie definitely does not do music anymore. He I think is involved in like environmental activism and racial justice causes, at least per his Twitter bio, when he found my review and tweeted about it and tagged me, and I'm like, Odie from the Goaties is talking about my review? Oh my god. And I don't use Twitter anymore. It became a dumpster fire. It became a bit of a dumpster fire, and even more so as after like post Elon. So I go on very occasionally to like post about my show, or post about like the Mannequin Pussy Free at Noon, for example. So like I looked at my mentions for the first time in like 2 weeks. I'm like, Odie's tweeting at me, right? And like all I could think about to reply was like, oh my god, I never use this site anymore, but like I'm so glad you found my review, and thank you so much for your music. It's meant so much to me. Like kind of a cheesy sentiment, I'm sure, but it was like, man. Anyway, I'm sorry.
That's beautiful. I love that. I don't know if you know this or not, but last year I talked to E.J. Simpson, who played bass for all the Goat stuff, and he said they got back together and were working on something, but it kind of fell apart. And I don't know how you have connections. Find that.
Oh, okay. I met EJ once, and he was a really sweet person. He came to, me and the folks at World Cafe Live co-curated a tribute to Jeff Buckley's Grace, and I think EJ's post-Goats band, Maggie Pearson EJ, which was more like folk rock oriented, either opened for Buckley or did some gigging with him, and so Jeff meant a lot to EJ, and he came out to this show and introduced himself, and I'm like, oh my god, like I know you.
He was at the, I don't know if you know this or not, but Jeff Buckley played Grape Street in Manningham.
Oh my god.
And just randomly. And I talked to EJ about it because he was there. And I think afterwards he said they all like went back and like jammed and stuff like that. And I think one of those songs is on, I forget which Maggie Pearson EJ album it's on. But one of those songs that they worked on with Jeff is on that. It's like the White Album, maybe. I can't remember exactly. But
that's amazing.
But yeah. And, you know, I mentioned earlier that I was talking to, or that I just talked to Craig Wedren. I asked him straight up, I was like, do you still have the isolated vocal tracks of I Want Someone Badly? And he was like, no, I think Sony has that. And I was like, God damn it, I want that. Like, I had to make a play for it. Jeff Buckley's one of my North Stars. Like, that is somebody who was incredibly influential to me without ever influencing my music specifically, because I don't think I could even, like, I would never even attempt to do something as beautiful and brilliant as what he used to do, to the point he saved my life. And it's gonna sound crass, but I was in my like late 20s. I was in Ocean City, Maryland, and I was ridiculously drunk. And it was like 3 a.m. in the morning. Nobody was back. I was the first person back in the hotel room, and I left a note. And I said, I'm going out swimming. If I'm not back by dawn, call search and rescue. And
Jesus.
I went out into the water, and it was the strongest undertow I ever felt in my life. And I had this quick thought in my head, which was, I have never even thought of something that is even a fraction as brilliant as Grace. Get out of the water right now. And that saved my life. Like,
oh my God. Wow.
Yeah. I really wish he was still here, because I really would love to have known what kind of creative force he would have become.
Same. Yeah. Like, even hearing like the rough stuff on sketches is like, wow. Or like the produced stuff on sketches where it was like, yeah, this isn't what I was going for. And it's like, this is fucking amazing. What do you mean this isn't what you were going, you know? So, yeah, no.
Yeah, one of those fragments is my favorite Jeff Buckley song, period, of all time, and that's Morning Theft, which I think is just absolutely hauntingly beautiful.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great. I can't believe I've now twice got to talk about Jeff Buckley in a row. It's perfect. I love it.
Nice.
Number 10, last of the top 10 countdown. What is your favorite Jawn of all time? Can be anything you want it to be.
Oh my God. Acadia National Park, Maine. C, previous answer about hiking and kind of just like disconnecting and being at one with like nature and the world, with somebody who you enjoy their company. And like Maureen and I have gone a few times, and I've gone with my family as well. And it's beautiful. It's like it's hiking, it's mountainous hiking, but it's not like when you go out west and like hiking in the Rockies or in California, where it's like you need to be at a certain level of like experience and like physical whatever to even attempt this. Like Acadia, it's like you can hike Cadillac Mountain, which is like the tallest mountain on that part of like the state, and it's like doable if you're a 10-year-old child or if you're like a grown-ass person. And if you don't want to hike it, you can drive up to the top. But then there's other like long hikes that you can do of like varying degrees of like challenge, and I don't know. It's beautiful. Like, it's mountainous, but it's also like coastal because it's on an island, you know? And then there's this super cute town nestled in there too called Bar Harbor. That's like basically a New Hope-esque sort of place, but super cute. It's just like great. I mean, I know it's like Maine is vacation land, but like truly, it's a great place to go and get away and see beautiful things.
That's awesome. I love that so much. That's so cool. I've never been. I'll have to add that to a destination list. Like I said, like hiking is something that I was never really into, but my wife was. And like ever since I started doing it with her, like, you know, prior to her, the only kind of hiking I ever liked doing was I played disc golf. So, you know, hiking with a purpose.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I love that. That's a beautiful answer. So XPN local, obviously, and then what's the frequency, as you mentioned, now weekly, which is now super weekly. Exciting. I can't believe it. Like it's something I've wanted forever. And also, Land of the Lost being weekly is amazing to me too. Like the whole new programming just was really exciting to see because I feel like it just speaks to like the state of the station. Like I think. I think that growth is something really beautiful.
Thank you, man. And I'm really excited about it too. Like it's funny it used to be like when people would ask me like, when are you going weekly? I'd be like, I can, you know, like doing it once a month is a lot. But then it's kind of taught me to think about how I program the show in a different way. And whereas like I used to like I used to lean heavily into like the full on request situation. And now, I mean, I'll still totally, if people like when I'm playing and they email me or DM me or get in touch some way and say, can you play this? I'll play it. I may save it for the next week's show, but I'll still totally play requests. But like, it's cool to think about like a smaller time frame and a more focused, like, what can I theme it around this month? And no, it's been a blast. It's cool to be part of like the whole like 70s to 80s to 90s continuum that the Friday night is now too. So yeah, I love it, and so far it's been a few weeks in. I've been managing it okay, and hopefully that continues to be the case.
It's awesome. It's awesome, and I love it. If these cool cats and kittens who watch this show or listen to this show, I should say, want to track you down, what's the best way to find you on the socials?
Best way is my Instagram. It's where I'm most active, and I'm just at Jawn Vettese on Instagram. JohnVettese.
Jawn, thank you so much for coming on the show, chatting with me, and more importantly, thank you for everything you've done for this music community. I say it, and I can't say it enough. I admire everything you do, and I am so glad that we finally got a chance to chat.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun, and I could easily talk for several more hours about music. But thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
My thanks again to Jawn for joining me on the show today. You can hear Jawn every week from 8 to 10 p.m. on Tuesday nights for the WXPN local show, and every Friday from 9 to 11 p.m. for the 90s show, What's the Frequency? And, of course, you can read his articles up on xpn.org and follow him on Instagram at Jawn Vettese. Links to all of those are, of course, in the show notes. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the Yo That's My Jawn podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from. And guys, it is not too late to get yourself a super awesome Jawn Scout Merit Badge for Citizenship of the World just by rating and reviewing us. Don't forget to visit www.yothat'smyjawn.com for the link tree to links to articles, merchandise, all of the previous episodes of this podcast, guest appearance on other pods, and more. And while you are there, be sure to sign up for our mailing list to get all of the updates delivered straight into your inbox. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/YoThat'sMyJawn for updates and live streams. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, X, and Threads at Yo That's My Jawn, and search Yo That's My Jawn on YouTube to find the Yo That's My Jawn YouTube channel. Like and subscribe the heck out of that ish. We want to hear from you. Reach out, and touch some Jawn. Another week down. Thanks, as always, for joining. And if you're listening to this on Monday, don't forget to tune in to Why Not Radio to catch me every Monday evening from 5 to 8 p.m. You can find that on your smart speaker of choice by visiting whynotradio.net or by downloading the app in your phone's app store. Cool. Blue skies. Until next time, everybody.
That's my Jawn.
Displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. You taste things that don't need to be measured. Yo, That's My Jawn is a Lonely Monk production. Written and produced by yours truly, Nate Runkle. Theme song by me, under the moniker Nate 3.0. Special thanks to Fox Run Brands, DX Ferris, Andrew Scott, Maggie Poulos, Dan Drago, Natalie Runkle, and the beautifully vibrant and wickedly stunning Katie Daubney. If you or anyone you know has any ideas they would like to share or any guests they would like to hear on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us at yothat'smyjawn@gmail.com or hit us up on the socials at yothat'smyjawn. Until next time, be sure to displace the guilt and embrace the pleasure. Tilt your head back and shout to the world, yo, that's my Jawn.